really proud that we were able to bring this group together for our kickoff event, where we're going to start learning about building hearts of many rooms. My name is Lisa Lisser, and I am co-chair of the Shared Society KEDMA platform of Global Connections of Greater Metro West Federation. And this is David Light, he's my co-chair, and we needed to bring this program to the fore here at this moment because things are getting touchy between, and that's a nice way to say it, between North American and Israeli Jews. We recognize that there is this growing chasm between diaspora and Israeli Jews when it comes to issues of Jewish identity and politics of loyalty and security. With our Building Hearts of Many Rooms project, we hope to engage Greater Metro West in conversations that go to the heart of what matters most to us regarding Israel. And what we're going to do this year, hopefully from now going forward, is host facilitated conversations in our community. We decided that we needed to find ways to get together to talk about these issues that matter to us with people who may not hold the same opinions. Because unless we look at each other face to face and talk freely without feeling like we're going to be attacked, it'll be...
It's hard to hear, Elise.
Okay.
It's better. That's better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for sharing. Now we can have a conversation. So the point is, after tonight, when we frame this conversation, we're going to have further conversations in people's homes with different members of our community who may or may not share the same opinion. And we were inspired to call this Building Hearts of Many Rooms, based on a book by Rabbi David Hartman. He framed the idea for us. His book is called The Heart of Many Rooms, Celebrating the Many Voices Within Judaism. And in it he shares this really beautiful quote. There is a beautiful metaphor in the Tosefta that describes the kind of religious sensibility the Talmud tried to nurture. Make yourself a heart of many rooms, and bring within it the words of the house of Shammai and the words of the house of Hillel. The words of those who declare unclean and the words of those who declare clean. In other words, become a person in whom different opinions can reside together in the very depths of your soul. In the very depths of your soul. How do we do it? How do we develop the muscles to be able to share and listen to different conflicting positions about Israel? How do we create safe space to hug and wrestle with these conflicts when it seems nearly impossible to even have the conversations at all? So our vision is to hold many of these conversations. And we're going to kick off tonight with a talk by our keynote speaker, Chancellor Arnie Eisen. And I'd like to introduce David Light to introduce Arnie.
Thank you, Lisa. So yes, my task here is to introduce our keynote speaker. And when I was talking to Chancellor Eisen about doing this introduction, I said, do you have anything sort of canned, that I can give your general introduction about? He said, yeah, do you really want to do that? And I said, well, give me that so that I can riff off of that. So I was sent over by his assistant, something that starts with, Arnold M. Eisen, one of the world's foremost authorities on American Judaism, is the 7th Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. I'm sorry, I can't really get much further than that. I mean, it's true, but no one calls him Arnold. I've known him for 30 years, so it's difficult to talk to your friends about one of the foremost authorities in the world on American Judaism, even though he is. And as my daughter pointed out to me the other day, his title is Chancellor? That is the silliest, most highfalutin title I've ever heard. So rather than reading this bio, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about how Arnie and I go back about 30 years. And I'll tell you a story of how I first met Arnie. I was 18 years old. I was a freshman during freshman orientation at Stanford. And there was, this was before classes started. And there was a sort of segment in the week-long orientation program where it was basically a couple of hours where whatever your background was, you were going to now go do sort of like the ethnic thing. So African American students at Stanford had a place to go to, Hispanic students had a place to go to, and gay and lesbian students had a place to go to. And I didn't really fall into any of those categories, so I had no place to go. And then I saw there was something about Jewish kids on campus. And I said, I don't really have any interest in that at all. I'm here in a bastion of secular learning. I don't need any of this. But I had no place else to go. So I went. And there were a few people there from Hillel and a couple of other organizations. And I started listening, and I was not particularly interested. And then Arnie Eisen walked in a little bit late. And he said, I only have a few minutes. I'm going to have to leave early. I teach a class called Introduction to Judaism. And I'm sure all of you are Jewish kids, so you think that you don't need that because you went to Hebrew school. And the reality is I don't get many freshmen or even sophomores in the class because everybody takes it to fill out their distribution requirements when they're starting to panic as a junior or senior. Because of that, the class is oversubscribed. But if you're a freshman and you want to be in this class, you're in the class. And I said, that sounds okay. I don't know what else to do. I'm out here, came out from New Jersey to California. I had no idea what classes I'm supposed to be signing up for. So I signed up for that class. And I became a religious studies major. And that really has a lot to do with who Arnie is. I thought about it, and there are, the people who are most influential in your life, shaping who you are and how you think. And Arnie is probably, other than people who I am related to by blood or marriage, the #1 person who has shaped the way I think about myself as a person and as a Jew in this world. I have, the unusual, I think, privilege of having been his student and then having become his friend over the past 30 years. So it's a really fun thing to be able to introduce him that way. That is, and there's
Name that too.
He deserves it because he is the chancellor. So with that as sort of the personal introduction, I will, he is one of the world's foremost authorities on American Judaism. His background is in sociology, which I think is particularly relevant to the talk tonight, and he has been speaking on exactly this topic of the relationship between American Jews and Israeli Jews over the past couple of years, most recently at the invitation of the President of Israel in Israel over this past summer, a talk that was received with some controversy, which I think is entirely appropriate given what the topic is. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my friend Arnie.
So now you know why it's such an extra special pleasure for me to be here tonight. I don't often get introduced that way. But larger, because I have a sense I'm in a room with a lot of people who are as worried about this problem as I am. I am the chancellor of a major institution with a large budget. I almost never lose sleep over JTS problems. The gap between Israel and diaspora drives me bananas, and I often lose sleep about it. I think we're just hurting ourselves as a people.
Can you talk into the mic a little better?
And you're not hearing me well enough? So if I hold the mic like this, can you hear?
Better.
Okay. So just start waving if you lose me, and maybe I'll pick up the mic in a minute and hold it in my hand. So I'm going to speak about this issue tonight, but I want to say at the beginning that even though I am this scholar of modern Judaism, and if you wanted to break down my expertise, I'm a particular expert on American Judaism and on Israeli Judaism. I've written books about these subjects and on the gap between the two communities. So my scholarship is going to enter into the talk, but this is not a scholarly talk. And I am the chancellor of a major Jewish institution that trains rabbis and cantors and educators and lay leaders and scholars, and we spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to make sure that the students we train have a great experience in Israel, and that becomes part of their bones, part of their DNA, so they can transmit that to others. So I'm going to draw on that experience, but that's not my subject tonight either. what I'm going to do is talk personally. Like this is like one Jew talking to other Jews about a problem that confronts us as a tradition and as a people. And I have the backing of the great scholar Gershom Scholem, who in 1969 already wrote a piece about Israel and diaspora, where he put his finger on the problem. And the last paragraph of that, if you want to find it, it's in a collection called Jews and Judaism in Crisis. Scholem says, at the end of the day, governments and organizations are not going to solve this problem. This problem is going to be solved when Jew by Jew by Jew, enough of us come to the conclusion that we have to build this bridge and take it upon ourselves personally to do it. So that's my theory. I think that's absolutely right. And when I heard from David that that's what you as a federation have decided to do, I was overjoyed. Because we have to learn to talk to each other differently, for reasons I'm going to talk about tonight. So we need to talk to each other about Israel, and we need to talk to Israelis. And knowing that they're diverse, and we're diverse, and knowing that it's absurd to think, given all the changes that have happened there in the last 20, 30, 40 years, and all the changes that have happened here, that the kinds of relationships we had a generation ago should still stay in place. It's absurd to think that it would. And as they're developing as a society and becoming more and more complex, and as we're developing as a community and becoming not only more complex, but also more attenuated, because we're losing a lot of Jews. So we have to rethink this relationship. The past models will not help us. So I'm going to start by speaking personally, so you're going to know where I'm coming from. This is not just a baby boomer doing what baby boomers love to do, which is talk about ourselves. I'm going to hope that as I talk, you're going to think about your own story with Israel, and that's going to help crystallize the issue. And then I'm going to go on and make 3 or 4 major points, and I'm hoping to stop in plenty of time so that there'll be lots of time here for not only questions and answers, but discussion. So I'll start the story in 1973, when I have graduated from Penn, and I arrived at Oxford, England for 2 years of graduate work, and I happened to arrive several days before the Yom Kippur War breaks out. This changed my life. I experienced the 1967 war as a 16-year-old kid in Philadelphia, where everybody I knew, not only at my Gratz College Hebrew High School, but at Central High School and the newspapers and the TV, everybody was completely pro-Israel. And then I'm in England in 1973, and students around us, except for the Jews who care and the Israelis, all the students around us were either hostile to Israel or totally indifferent. The newspapers, with the exception of one, are all anti-Israel. The BBC is anti-Israel, and I was in shock. I never experienced anything like this in my life, and I didn't do what I was tempted to do, say, okay, I love Oxford, but goodbye, I'm going to Israel, which some of my friends did, picked up and went to Israel to volunteer. I made a kind of vow that whatever I'm going to do in life after Oxford, the next stage is going to be Israel. I'm going to spend the next period of my life in Israel. As it happens, I've decided at Oxford to be an academic studying Judaism, and the best place in the world, and pretty much the only place to study what I wanted to study, was the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And so, in 1975, I find myself in Israel studying modern Jewish thought at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And that's an experience. I'll tell you about the academic part of it in a minute, but you can imagine the country's picking itself up still after the Yom Kippur War. I got there with 2 good Israeli friends who came to Oxford in the course of the 1974-75 academic year as kind of R&R after their army service. One of them had been in Sinai, and one of them was seriously wounded in that tank battle in the Golan. So I'm giving you this background so you understand that I had been a, let's call it a religious Zionist. I was raised as a religious conservative Jew. The book of the Torah that spoke the most to me was the book of Deuteronomy. I was a Zionist out of the book of Deuteronomy. We had this land given to us to try to do things differently than other people had done them, to put our values to the test, to not just be prophetic critics sitting on the side, but to try to make policy based on Jewish values. I was that kind of Zionist. And then Oxford and 75 made me a political Zionist. I mean, I'll just tell you one experience which you might not have thought of. that made me a political Zionist. I would like, to this day, to go to sleep listening to the radio. In 1975, the only radio station in Israel that stayed on all night was the Army radio station. Right? So I would go to sleep listening to the Army radio station. So I flipped the dials on my little transistor radio. You can imagine. Arabic, 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 Israeli Army, Arabic, 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 Arabic. You don't have to be brilliant to take the lesson. The only thing standing between me and billions of people who didn't want me there was the Israeli Army. I was a political Zionist. I was in Israel in 1975. I was surrounded by people who had either been in the war or had family members in the war. Most of them had lost people in the war. So this stuff prints itself on you indelibly. And of course, it's not something I expect my students to share, because they didn't experience it. They can hear about it from me, but they didn't experience it. So then I'm riding these buses. You all remember Egged buses? And I'm riding through the Arava or something, going to a lot, and these people are getting on board, and they have faces that were unlike any Jewish faces I'd ever seen. And I knew, without having studied it, that somehow they were part of me, I was part of them, and I was responsible for them. I didn't read that in the book. I mean, I'd read lots of books of modern Jewish thought, and I was, that's what I was doing my PhD in. But that's the experience that gave Jewish peoplehood to me. That somehow all these people were connected to me, and I came from a very privileged diaspora, so I had responsibilities to them. And when soldiers would get on the bus with their Uzis, I was happy to see them. Now remember, I'm coming off of the Vietnam War in the States. I'm not happy about guns. I'm not a big fan of wars. But when those soldiers got on the bus with their submachine guns, yes, please sit next to me, because there are people out there who want to kill me without knowing me just because who I am. But those are formative experiences. So that's 1975 at the Hebrew University. And this is stuff that impressed itself on me indelibly. And there's one more thing I want to share from that time, which I thought about afterwards a lot, which was that Israelis then and since argued fiercely about the way to solve the problem, the way to attain peace. And they argued more fiercely then than they do now, because then everybody believed it was still possible. Everybody had a solution. They disagreed about what the solution was, but everybody thought there was a way to get peace. Now I don't know very many Israelis who actually think there's a way to find peace. So they're disagreeing about what to do in spite of the lack of peace, but they're not arguing over how to find peace, because most people don't think it's possible right now. But then everybody did, and what struck me the most was they argued, then they had dinner together, and nobody was afraid. That's what got me. As a young 24-year-old kid from America in Israel in 1975, after the country came within one tank battle of destruction, when I hate to even say the sentence, Israelis are arguing about how to solve the problem, but nobody's giving up. Nobody's afraid. Everybody's saying, you all like Hebrew, yep, said them, yet tov, yistader, al tita, you said it. And I used to laugh at it, like, they have all these terrible problems, but don't worry, it'll be okay. That's a philosophy of life which I have adopted. You don't run a Jewish institution in the United States in 2018 without believing it's going to be okay. If you're a pessimist, forget it. You've got to believe it's going to work out. We have no choice but to work it out, and therefore we'll work it out. This is profound. That's one of the many lessons that Zionism taught me in Israel from 1975 to 1978. So when Ruby Rivlin gave his speech about the 4 tribes, Herzliya a number of years ago, I applauded, because here was an Israeli president who was saying, look, we got a problem here. We've got almost exactly 25% Arab, 25% secular, 25% Eton Mizrach, and 25% left-wing Ashkenazi, right? And we're splitting up as a society, and we don't respect one another. We have separate school systems, Haredian in a separate school system, right? Zionist Orthodox in a separate school system, secular in a separate school system, and Arab in a separate school system, and they don't learn about each other, but they learn to despise each other. This is, I'm pretty much quoting the president of Israel. And I love this, because he's saying, okay, let's be Zionist about this. We got a problem, you face up to it, you solve it. And then he came to America, and he did this other thing I applauded. He called us the 5th tribe. That we are the 5th tribe. And I said, great, we're tribe number 5. That's important, because there is no solution to the Israeli problem without us, I believe, and there's no solution to our problems without them, and so let's have a new kind of dialogue. All right, so that's the background. That's where I'm coming from on this. The other piece you should know is that just before I met David, my wife and I had made Aliyah. I did my PhD, came back to New York, was a professor at Columbia, always with the intention of going back on Aliyah. I wanted to meet and marry a woman who wanted to make Aliyah with me. I did. We made Aliyah. The story about this is in 1982, we're getting married. And the rabbi who's marrying us under the chuppah says, "Isn't it wonderful that these two young people are going to make Aliyah together?" Our parents had not heard about this. So that was our Aliyah. And it was clear there was no way to make a living. I was a professor at Tel Aviv University. My wife was a social worker. We came back, and that's when I came to Stanford, and then met David, and the rest is history, and here I am. But that's why, the sum total of this is not an academic issue for me. This is an existential issue. These two are two parts of myself. When I go to Israel, I have close Israeli friends. They speak Hebrew by arrangement, I speak English. Because we want each of us to talk the language we're most comfortable in. I understand their Hebrew, they understand my English. If I have to, I'll talk Hebrew with them. But this is a conversation in me. And if this issue is going to tear the Jewish people apart, it's going to tear me apart. So we can't let that happen. So we've got to solve this for my sake. We're going to solve this problem. Okay. Thesis number one. This is not a new problem. That is a controversial statement. I'm going to argue that with evidence, it's not a new problem. Some things recently have made it worse. I won't deny that some things recently have made it worse. But if you have a problem and you want to solve it, you have to understand the causes of it. So if you think that the causes are of recent vintage and you take away those causes, it's going to be okay, you're deceiving yourself. Right? So the cause is not the Kotel decision. Right? The cause, one of the aggravating things that insulted a lot of people. The cause is not Haredi intransigence. I had the experience in Israel with a Wexner group where I was the translator for a Haredi rabbi who agreed to speak Hebrew. I don't understand Yiddish well enough to do simultaneous translation. But I said, because he said, Reform and conservative Jews are Jews the same way that Christians and Muslims are Jews. That's what this Haredi rabbi told the Wexner group. And I said those words. And I said to him afterward, Adoni, אתה פשוט לא מבין אותי. אתה לא יודע מי אני. אין לך מושג מי אנחנו. But you have no idea who we are. But I understand the problem, and we are delegitimized by Haredi, and that's bad for our relationship. But this is not the cause of the problem. Bibi Netanyahu's policies are not the cause of the problem, even though more American Jews are disenchanted with them and some Israeli Jews disenchanted with them. I take the position that even if the government were a Barak government or a Peres government or a Rabin government, a lot of the problems would still be here. They've been exacerbated by current policies, the nation-state bill and things like that, but they're not caused by those policies. And finally, Trump is an irritant. I'm speaking objectively, but that is when 80% of the Jews in America vote against him, and again in the recent election, 80% of Jews voted Democratic, and the election was seen as a referendum on Trump. So 80% of Jews voted Democrat, and Israelis love Trump. Love Trump, wall to wall, almost. Love Trump, left, right, and center. And so you have a gap. It's an irritant. And I don't deny that these are irritants and serious problems. And if you're a young person, and all you know is the last 20 years, and all you know really since you started thinking is Netanyahu, or the